Hello students, my name is Mohammed. I am history teacher. Today I will be with Form 3 students in the fourth topic of history called Colonial Social Services. And this is the second lesson. This is the second lesson. History Form 3. History Form 3. Our topic is Colonial Social Services. Colonial Social Services. And our subtopic is Colonial Education. Colonial Education. Colonial Education. Colonial Education. In the previous lesson, we discussed one of the part of colonial education, one of the parts of colonial education. Who can remind us what we have discussed in the previous lesson? Who can remind us? Yes. Okay. In the previous lesson, we discussed about the meaning of colonial education. Also, we discussed about the objectives of colonial education. Objectives of colonial education. Who can remind us one of the objectives of colonial education? Who remembers? Yes, Juma, do you remember? Good. One of the objectives of colonial education was to train African manpower, This means the whites introduced this type of education in order to get the assistance from the Africans who could work alongside them in performing some duties and responsibilities. Okay, another one who can remind us, who remembers? Another objective of colonial education we have discussed in the previous lesson. Yes, to facilitate raw materials production. Good. I hope you remember what we have discussed in the previous lesson. Today we continue with another part of this subtopic of colonial education. And today we are going to discuss about the features of colonial education. Today we are going to discuss about the features of colonial education. Features of colonial education. Features of colonial education. Who can try? Who can try to tell us one of the features of colonial education he or she knows? Who can try? Yes, who can try to tell us? One, only one, only one. I need only one feature of colonial education. Who knows? Who remembers? Okay, good. One of the features of colonial education, here we say, it was unevenly distributed. it was unevenly distributed. This means during colonial era, the schools were built in the areas where production took place and in the areas where missionaries or settlers settled or lived. But in some areas, especially those labor reserves, no schools built or no schools constructed. This is how we say unevenly distributed. Not all parts of the colony ensured with schools during colonial era. Very few regions, very few areas had schools. And these areas were the areas of settlers or missionaries or productive areas. In the areas where labor reserves were put, in the areas where the colonialists decided to put as labor reserves, no schools were found or were constructed. So it was unevenly distributed. This is one of the features of colonial education. Another feature of colonial education, it was pyramid in shape, or pyramid in shape. It was a pyramid in shape. Do you know pyramid shape? I think you know it. You have learned in mathematics, basic mathematics and other subjects. Okay? Do you know pyramid shape? Simply, this is a pyramid shape. Here we can see a simple shape of pyramid or pyramid shape. In pyramid shape, we have two areas. We have top, where we can call it apex, or at the top, and we have this one where we call base. As we can see, the base is too large compared to the top or apex, which it is too narrow. So during colonial education, the number of the students at the lower level or at the bottom level, the number of the students at the bottom level was very high. At the bottom level or base level is where we can find a huge number of the students. But once you go higher, once you go to the top, the number of the students decrease. This means at the top level, the number of the students at the top level was very few. The number of the students was very few. Was not high, was very low. Was very low, not few, was very low. Was low or lower compared to the base level. This is also seen in our education system in Tanzania and other African countries. For example, in Tanzania, the number of the students in primary schools is very high compared to the number of the students in secondary, and in secondary level is different from the colleges. The number is different from the universities. So this is what we call a pyramid shape or a pyramid in shape. So by then, in colonial education, many students were found in the primary level or in the base level, and very few students were found at the top level or higher classes. In middle schools, in secondary schools, in colleges, there we can find very few Africans or very few students. Are we together? Okay? Another characteristic or feature of colonial education, it based on racism. It based on racism. It based on racism. Based on what? On racism. During colonial era, 3 different races found in Africa. In Africa, we have, in Africa during that era, during that time we had the whites. We had whites. These were the Europeans who settled in Africa. Also, we had the Asians, people from India, from Asia, and other Arab countries. Also, we had the Africans. These were the natives, found in Africa. So the colonial education based on racism means the whites provided with good or better education. These had their schools, with best education in terms of quality. Also, the Asians had their schools, with better education. And the Africans also had their schools. The Africans also had their schools, which were very poor compared to the schools of the whites, compared to the schools of the Asians. So we can say the colonial education based on racism in terms of schools and the quality of education provided. So the whites had their schools, Asians had their schools, while the Africans had their schools. Unfortunately, these our fellow Africans, provided with the poorest education compared to other races. So, based on racism, or it was based on racism, is one of features of colonial education. Are we together? Okay? If we are together, we proceed with our lesson. Another characteristic or another feature of colonial education It was discriminative in sex. It was discriminative in sex and social classes. Here we have two things. We have discriminative in sex. This means the Africans or this colonial education provided based on sex segregation or discrimination and the social classes. Here, simply we say boys were much more involved, enrolled compared to the girls, So the sex which was given priority during colonial education, it was this one. The boys were given priority rather than the girls. And many schools were boys' schools. Many schools constructed in Africa were boys' schools compared to the girls' schools. That's why we say it was discriminative. Boys were given priority, while girls were not given the first priority in acquiring education. Also based on social classes. The ones who succeeded to get colonial education based on social classes were the sons of chiefs. The sons of chiefs, here we say, sons of chiefs. These chiefs were the tribal leaders or traditional leaders in Africa. Their sons were given priority in acquiring colonial education. Also, sons from productive areas, Sons from productive areas also were given priority in getting colonial education. It means the sons who were from labor reserves didn't have priority of getting this kind of education. Are we together? Okay? Another feature of colonial education, this colonial education was taught in foreign language. It was taught in foreign languages. It was taught in foreign languages. Foreign languages like English language and other languages brought by colonialists were used as a medium of instructions. These Africans who got the colonial education were taught various issues, various lessons in foreign languages. Currently, we have this English language in Tanzania. It's not our mother tongue language. This is one of the foreign languages brought by whites in Africa. We are currently using this language as a medium of instruction the schools. From primary, we have the so-called English medium. We have secondary schools, English medium, or we use this language in secondary colleges and universities. So this foreign language, this English language, is one of the foreign languages brought by colonial education and is one of the languages used in teaching during colonial era. So one of the characteristics of colonial education is this one. It was taught in foreign languages. Another characteristic, are we together? Okay? If we are together, let us proceed. It was too theoretical. It was too theoretical. Theoretical. Theoretical with few science practices. With few science practices. It was too theoretical with few science practices. Who can tell us why the colonial education was too theoretical? Why these colonialists, these European imperialists, didn't teach our fellow Africans practical, or decided to introduce very few science practices in their education? Why? Who can tell us the reason behind this? There must be a reason behind introduction of theoretical system than practical system of learning. Okay. The whites came in Africa to exploit the Africans with their resources. We are not meant to develop the African continent. The whites came in Africa not to develop the African continent, but to exploit the African resources. With this aim, they decided to teach the Africans only theories. They decided to teach the Africans only theories with very few science practices. They thought teaching Africans more science practices is to develop the Africans, something which was different from the needs or from the requirement and intentions. That's why we say it was too theoretical. Africans taught how to produce, very few production skills, how to produce various raw materials, how to deal with minerals, and some skills. Very few skills. So we say colonial education was too theoretical with few science practices. Another feature, it was foreign-oriented and examination-based. Colonial education, it was foreign-oriented and examination-based. Examination-based. Whatever taught by the whites in colonial education based on Europe. This means the Africans were taught various issues concerning European continent rather than African continent. The Africans were taught about mountains in Europe, while we have our own mountains in Africa. And the content which was provided to the students based on examination. We together? Okay? So these were the features of colonial education. Do you have any question about features of colonial education, dear students? Have you understood the lesson? Okay. I hope you have enjoyed and you have understood the lesson. Now is your time to revise what we have discussed today and then do this question. After revising what we have discussed, don't forget to do this exercise. Critically analyze the features of colonial education introduced in Africa by the whites. Critically analyze the features of colonial education introduced in Africa by the whites. So, dear students, I hope you will revise and then do the following or this exercise. See you next time. Goodbye.